David?
Sure. I'm David Miron. I am in San Antonio, Texas. I've been a certified erotic blueprint coach since 2018. I have a kind of varied background coming to this. I have been a church musician since I was 13, so that's 47 years. And in 2010, I was ordained in the United Methodist Church, and in 2017 had my orders removed for violating the celibacy and singleness requirement for pastors. And since then, I've been moving into forming a spiritual community for sex positive and polyamorous people, working in coaching, continuing as a church musician, and I was trained as a pipe organ builder in my 20s, and I'm back to that work. I'd like to tell a brief story. I didn't mention I identify as genderqueer, pansexual, and polyamorous, and so this is a story about one of my partners, and it's not specifically about sex, but the last year I turned 60 at the end of September, and I had a very large party, and of course I wanted all of my partners to be there. And this particular partner had been talking to me for several months, helping me plan the party. And a few weeks before, she messaged me and said, "Oh my gosh, I totally blanked, but I have this other commitment on that weekend that I have to be out of town and I can't be there." And I went into a week of having little tantrums to myself and not doing very well with it. And I spent some time really feeling into what was happening and realized that she was giving me a simple, clear no. The other commitment predated mine. And the fact that she was able to give me a no was, for her personal growth, a huge win. And it began not only to the anger and emotions I had around it dissipated, but I began to just really feel deep joy that she was able to give me a no when that's been so difficult for her in her life. And so by the time my party came around, it was a totally natural thing for me to just be there. She called me on the phone, but over the course of the next couple of months, the fact that she was able to give me that clear no, and I was able to then finally receive it clearly, really led to an immense deepening in our relationship. We had way more trust of each other because she had been able to give the no and me to take it. She now was able to do that in other things that she had not felt comfortable saying no about before. So the big no led to small no's, and we've really gotten to know each other at a completely deeper level as a result of that. So I just wanted to share that story because it was a turning point for me in realizing how important no is.
Thank you. I'm curious, did you do focused work to get to the place where hearing her no was accessible to you in that way?
Yes, I've been a client of somatic experiencing therapy for a few years, and so I had a session with my somatic experiencing person who's amazing. I talked to other coaches. I bent the ear of several people in my class, and people just kept pointing out to me, it wasn't about me. The no wasn't about me, and realizing that the no was a need she had rather than repudiation of anything about myself or my person. That was the turning point, I think, in that. And all the people that listened to me, I'm deeply appreciative to that. To them.
Yeah. So it sounds like your ability to stand aside and see her from a place of empathy and hold her in that love allowed for an opening of deeper intimacy and connection and trust.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the interesting things I'm discovering about polyamory is that a change in one of my relationships ends up changing all of them, because I'm the common denominator in those things. So my holding more space and more trust for her allowed me to do the same for other partners then.
Yeah.
Within, I mean, instantly it all changed. So, yeah. Other questions? I don't.
Coaches, do you have any insights or thoughts on this?
A thought which had never dawned on me. David, thank you for sharing that. I know the tantrum well.
Yeah.
Tantrum of the no. What? Oh boy. What I caught when you were summarizing at the end was that when you're faced with the no and you go through that with your partner, you get knowing. And I just loved the play on words that popped into my head. The no leads to knowing one another, self and one another. Just I hadn't seen that. Yeah.
I should have mentioned at the outset that I have her consent to be saying this. I really meant to say that first, but I asked if I could tell this story, and she was happy for that to happen. So, yeah, there's more knowing of myself for sure. What my capacity is, and how much space can I hold? And that's really.
Can I ask you to say more about that? That's actually very interesting. What your capacity, how your capacity has changed. That's interesting.
So I guess I'm using that term in the somatic experiencing sense, which is literally our nervous system's ability to hold sensation. And so in growing emotionally, or in having connections here, through the somatic work, I actually have a larger capacity, but this was one of the catalysts that brought up something else. And you know, it often seems in doing that everything has an overlay of the past. And so, you know, this allowed both I and her to work through things that were overlays of the past, but also okay. I'm trying to think what I have consent to share about. But in all of my relationships, I'm the space holder. Let's put it that way. And so that knowing to hold space requires the other person to trust me or to have faith in me. And so when that increased, then my capacity for holding space increases.
I really like what you're saying about how the receipt of a no is almost the same thing as creating safe space. Because I think you're right.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. There's some people who have never said no to me about anything. And now it's becoming difficult for me to fully trust their yes. I don't think no is necessarily required, but I know there have been instances where they were maybes, and I ended, as we say in consent, a maybe is a no. And so when they've been a maybe, I've said the no for them, but I've wished they had the ability to say the no to me rather than the maybe. It would have felt cleaner.
Thank you.
So.
Jack, do you have any insights here? Any thoughts?
Yeah, I think I like that about the having empathy for the person that is saying no, because I think we do live in a yes culture. Like we want to say, I think we are conditioned to want to say yes. I mean, there's so many books on
totally
getting to yes.
Yeah.
The art of persuasion. And as a culture, we're just bombarded to want to say yes and get to yes and persuade people to say yes. I often tell people, I said, no is one of the hardest things you're going to ever have to say. It's hard to say no. And what David was saying. He's saying, hey, a maybe. They go, maybe, and you see that. They, maybe I want to do that. Maybe I can go to that party. Maybe. Why don't you just say no? You see it showing up as maybes.
You know, I think it's really important to presence that, at least the way I think about no is that the maybe is just as sacred. Like I think a really trauma-informed response to like an approach to rejection and no, like embraces the reality of people not being sure, right? And not knowing themselves and not knowing their yes or their no. And actually, to me, like the broader way to like really like equip yourself to roll out the red carpet for the no involves doing what David did, like seeing the maybe and even like sensing into the situation and actually saying no for the person. But I would actually say you don't necessarily need that to change. I mean, in some ideal world, but I think a really trauma-informed world, as we know just how much trauma there is that we all carry, like let's make it our practice to not even need there to be a time when people always have access to their yes or no, because I don't think it's realistic.
Mm-hmm. I see that, and I guess that brings up for me the idea that in any connection between two people, there's each of us and there's the space between us. Mm-hmm. And the space between us is where we're holding the consent, whatever that is. So no, being able to the no leading to knowing, I really like that, because I need to know that space between me and her, the space between me and other people, in order to know what my actual desire is in that moment too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I want to say for myself, if I say maybe personally, if I say yes, if I say no, if I say maybe, all three of those, having someone witness and hold the presence for my answer feels really good to me. Mm-hmm. So if my answer is maybe, holding that, the presence that I'm a maybe right now, and maybe getting curious.
Yeah.
Maybe it makes me curious. Maybe it's a maybe, so what do we need here? You know, it makes me lean in and discover. It actually opens possibility and expansion for me because there's more to explore, maybe for me personally. I wouldn't want the maybe to be an aspect of convince me to a yes or shut me down into a no. But each time it's just held in authentic presence, feels good to me. Feels safe.
I think I totally agree on, but I think there's some situations in which maybe means no, but people aren't willing to say it, and we have to be. I guess in immediately sexual situations, I'm not willing to let maybe be maybe. I think it has to become a no for me then with that person.
I really empathize with what you're saying right now, David.
Mm-hmm.
I get that.
Yeah, because otherwise
I like that like my need here in this moment is clarity, and I'm going to like default to like moving out of that because I don't feel like I'm getting even consent to move forward energetically. Like it depends on how maybe is delivered, but I feel that.
Yeah, and I think it's about communication, right? Because if I say maybe and want you to hold presence for my maybe, that doesn't mean you have to consent to. You get your consent as well, right? And if your consent is, if you're a maybe, mine is a no. That's okay too.
I think, like Francesca, I think I might be saying your name wrong, but I saw the slow in your comment, and I missed all the comment. But I'm like, slow down, felt really good. And Christina, when you were talking earlier around, what if we could see consent? What the dream is? What if consent is like a juicy word, and it's part of the foreplay and part of the pleasure? And it's so cool because if you hear someone's maybe in a curious way, and you know when you hear someone's maybe, you're going to pause, which is like a no behavior, right? Like David, I love what you're saying. I'm going to treat a maybe as a no, which means whatever that means, like the stopping of the thing that you were about to do, right? Or the pause. It's a pause, and so it's a really like beautiful. There's so much pleasure in that moment of discovery and wonderment, and maybe even making the no not bad. And I like it, making the yes not bad. Jack, I love what you're saying. I hate salespeople because they're trying to yes. I want to like scream at them. So none of it bad. They're just a position that we're in that moment, and we can flow and move to the next. Anyway, so that's
Right. I think where I'm coming from primarily is if my if there's any chance that I'm going to violate someone's autonomy, I have to make it be a no. But in any other cases, maybe can remain maybe and be a place of inquiry. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I've been creating a consent quiz as part of the membership process for my online play party community, and it's been really interesting to like say, okay, so multiple choice. If someone gives you a no when you're like in like a sexual situation, you know, like what are the appropriate actions, right? And one of them, I put this on there intentionally, was immediately walk up and go away. And was like, oh, that doesn't feel good at all. Like that's actually terrible. It could be potentially traumatic. But it's like, how do we like isolate that as its own form of like really bad form? To like receive a no and be like, oh, cool, peace, you know, and like disengage completely, because obviously like staying in connection is the most important thing. But like, it was one of those moments where the consent conversation was transcended by the connection conversation, and they have like a rule that could prevent someone from doing that. But it was like, please don't be that person who hears a no and immediately gets up and goes. I mean, technically, you're going to make sure you don't consent violate, but that's awful, right?
Thank you, because this whole bringing it to the societal situation, watching people talking and watching collectives of people saying, no, please don't do that. That's offensive to me. That's hurting me. Or someone saying no in the non-no form, like it's a negative response, like it's a like no, don't go there, but they're not saying no. And the reactions that we're having, some is we're like nope, done, gone. Some of we're having tantrums, which is my version, and it's such an uncomfortable space for us to be in. Hearing the no, wanting the yes. It's just generally all of it is uncomfortable for all of us. We just don't live here much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And it's certainly what's being felt, you know, to bring it back to like the emotional roller coaster that I assume that all of us have to a certain degree been on this week around race in this country. Like I'm really I see us all holding space for this gigantic no from everybody who's out in the streets. Like there's this huge no being like voiced right now.
Mm-hmm.
And as a white person, I'm just like, yes to this no.
Mm-hmm.
Indeed.
Sometimes saying no opens possibilities.
Nice.
It gives
Yes,
options
correct.
in other ways except exactly what you were looking at. And that's what I meant. It's one of those times collectively where our big no opens expanded possibilities of empowerment in more ways that we all need to say yes to.
100%. The no and the don't go there is forcing us to find another way, and it's amazing to observe. Yeah. And then you take that down to the relationship. So you get a no, which is very uncomfortable to hear from your partner or child, because I often hear it from both my 10-year-old and my partner. If I'm resourced, creativity comes from that. Totally.
No is sort of, it's setting boundaries, right? It's setting a container around something. So in writing music, you've got to have a set of parameters. You can't just do anything and have it make sense. You start out with some kind of, whether it's in your head deliberately or whether you've determined what they are ahead of time, there's a set of parameters that you're working with. So sometimes I think no's are opening up things that we didn't even see, like that's what Beth's saying, I guess.
Yeah. In one of our other calls, David Rollins Silverman, one of our other Blueprint coaches, said that a no always opens up a yes. When you say no to something, you're always saying yes to something else, even if that's a yes to me honoring myself. Mm-hmm. Saying no, if that's really what I mean, is a yes to something else. Mm-hmm. You know? And I think that's crucial.